Okay, good morning. This is very exciting for me. I moved to Philadelphia in 2008 and quickly learned about Creative Mornings, Design Philly, everything that's happening. And I was like, gosh, it would be awesome to be in with that group of cool people. And when they reached out for this opportunity, I was a little bit like, oh my gosh. So kind of a nerdy little pause on the way to the rest of my talk. So thank you for being here. Today, we're going to do a little bit of reframing. I'm going to talk about the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society. I'm going to talk about the Philadelphia Flower Show, and then hopefully maybe show how those two are connected in a way that you might not have known about. So introduction, say a little bit about myself. What is PHS? What is the Flower Show? It's actually going on right over there. Reframing the experience and giving you a sense of how we curate the show, particularly post-COVID. And at the end of it, if you hear or see anything about it, you'll kind of have a different understanding in a different context, and then maybe even be able to recognize some of PHS's work out in the community, and that will help close that gap. So as mentioned, my name's Seth Pearsoll. I'm the creative director for the Philadelphia Flower Show, and that means I basically handle with my team 3 different areas. It's the design and the overall creative direction of the show. It's the curation of the gardens, garden content, artists, exhibitors, etc. And then it's the strategic direction and planning for the flower show. What does this thing need to be long term? Where does this need to go? How can it stay relevant? All of that stuff, my team and I handle it. So a little bit about PHS, the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society. So PHS, we use horticulture to advance health and well-being in the greater Philadelphia region. Essentially, we are a diverse community. We're a nonprofit, but we're a diverse community of people and other organizations and affiliate. We believe in the power of horticulture to make social and environmental change. Essentially, PHS believes gardening and horticulture belong to everybody. And I'll come back to that point because that'll tie it all together nicely. We do this by using 4 impact priorities to increase health and well-being. Creating healthy living environments, increasing access to fresh food, building meaningful social connections, and expanding economic opportunity. This is a somewhat new reframing. Our organization, we do a lot of different things or have done a lot of small and large things. Sometimes it's a little disparate. Recently, we've sort of strategically been reorienting ourselves internally. So these are the 4 kind of building blocks that we try to tie everything to one way or another, or filter projects or filter work through. And we do this through 3 program channels. So basically the organization, aside from the shared services, there's sort of 3 umbrella teams, and that's how the work is categorized in the city. There's our public gardens and landscapes, we have our healthy neighborhoods group, and then we have shows and events. So public gardens and landscapes hit those 4 impact priorities, particularly in 3 different areas. They're creating healthy living environments, they're increasing access to fresh food, and then they're building meaningful social connections. So what is this thing actually? So if you've been to, say, the Navy Yard, or Logan Square, or Rodin, or many other sites, you've probably seen our work. It's important to have beautiful spaces that are free and accessible that anybody can recreate, hang out, do whatever you do in. So that's what this particular group is. It's getting that belief that all these spaces should be open and accessible. Some public gardens you have to pay for and travel to. These are things that are meant to be accessible to everybody so we can give best management practices and great spaces right there for you to see and experience. We design and maintain over 80 acres of public gardens and landscapes throughout Philly. You can see a few of our projects here: Logan Square, containers at 20th and Arch, the Navy Yard, Rodin. Logan Square is a really, really prominent space. It's not a space that we own, obviously, but we garden on that space. In 2022, we planted over 70,000 rainbow-colored bulbs. It was a riotous display of color, very prominent location, and it was a nod to our colleagues over in the Netherlands in Keukenau. So we worked with them to do this particular plant palette. So just another example of, landscape open, accessible, and there for everybody or anybody to enjoy. Now the Healthy Neighborhoods Initiative, so we have public gardens and landscapes, and that's focusing on access to these beautiful open garden spaces. The Healthy Neighborhoods is a little more focused on creating healthy, sustainable communities, so mental health, physical health, really dial it into that part of what horticulture can do. So this hits on all 4 of those impact priorities that we talked about just a bit ago. So this particular kind of neighborhood or umbrella program group, we think about it basically 4 different buckets. We have community gardens, we have the tree programs, which I'll talk about, we have stormwater solutions, and then the transformation of vacant lots, and then our workforce development. There's a few other things, but this tidy little sum is a good sense of what this is. So the tree programs here in Philadelphia, many of you may be tree tenders, kind of a beloved program. It's been around for a long time. It's interesting because rather than planting the trees ourselves, really it's a training program. We've trained over 6,000 volunteers, usually in local or kind of hyper-local, sometimes by block groups. We train them in how to acquire and plant trees. We organize that. There's bilingual training in Spanish. As of 2022, we planted nearly 3,000 street trees with these community groups, 112 of them, and we also work with these groups to become checkers so that we can document with a tag and try to maintain and make sure these trees are not just dying, 2 days after we've been planting them. And we've planted over 25,000 since 1991. So a pretty interesting way that PHS aspires to not just do the work, but to teach others how to do the work. Just another example of tree canopy coverage. Ideal tree canopy coverage is 30%. Philly average is around 20%. Many neighborhoods are down not even at 3%. So, it's a significant health and wellness issue, and just an example of how the Healthy Neighborhoods program is trying to use horticulture to do its part to tackle that. Another one that I want to talk about is transforming vacant land and workforce development, because it's very possible you've seen this work and not really known about it. And this is pretty substantial. One of my colleagues, the colleague who runs this program, actually did a TED Talk on it. So it's a model that's nationally recognized and even internationally in some cases. We've talked to people who are looking at violence reduction, how can we use landscape and other these methods to assist in that. So it's pretty interesting and it's pretty well regarded, which feels good. So essentially, PHS uses gardening and greening and landscaping to clean and maintain these lots. We will take out the trash and refuge, we'll grade it, get any rubble out of there, and they basically become mini parks. And they create kind of that little nod to broken windows, where if somebody's caring for it and using the space, it gives the perception becomes reality that people do care about the space and they do want to use it. And that absolutely happens. So what is a vacant lot? This is a vacant lot. Philadelphia has many of them. No doubt you've seen them. Philly has this many of them. There is nearly 40,000. So it's a pretty big issue for Philadelphia. We do our small part. We tackle about a third, maintain about a third of that, so about 13,000, which is pretty substantial and gaining more and more all the time. So as I said, these become mini parks, getting that access to horticulture, giving examples of this that anybody can use, not just in one place, but in and around the community, not just Center City, but all throughout Philadelphia. A few that I want to call out, 4th and CB more. Everybody loves a good before and after pic, so you can see what these start at and what they end at. And the nice thing is that image on the right there, that's pretty much how you can identify that work. So graded, it's usually got a white fence. Sometimes it's not painted white, but they started off painted white so you could easily identify them and see this federation throughout the city. They're graded, usually simple plantings and trees, and like I said, they become little mini parks, little anchors. Another one, the Peace Garden on 29th Street, lovely planting, not too dissimilar from a plant palette that you might find at the Navy Yard or in Center City, right here in the neighborhood. Now, we just got done talking about the first two buckets of what PHS does. We talked about public gardens and landscapes, what that is. We talked about the Healthy Initiative group, the umbrella of those programs and what that is. And then, as I said, the goal today is to relate how the flower show fits into that. And that's what we're going to transition to now. We see the flower show as at least impacting 4 of those points: creating healthy living environments, expanding economic opportunity, building meaningful social connections. So what is the flower show essentially, right? This is an annual event. It's really meant to celebrate gardens and horticulture. First started in 1829, really kind of as people just with their individual plants, non-professionals, all gathering and sharing enthusiasm over individual plants. Current participants are local, national, and international, which in a couple of slides might surprise you who has been a part of the flower show. One interesting differentiator between this particular project and other peer projects or peer shows around the world is the tying to the mission. So it's professional and then it's non-professional content. So we have world-class people, world-class designers, really big in the fields that they're in, and that is definitely a part of the show. But in keeping with the rest of the mission, a good third of the show is the non-professional content. Anybody can be a part. We could enter this aglanema in right now and maybe win something. And that's pretty important. So, when you come to the show, you'll see big kind of splashy displays, and eventually you make your way to smaller displays, which are frequently maybe a community group or a non-professional trying their hand at a concept, and then down to the individual plant material, where there's just a plant lover who loves that little pothos they've been nurturing, and they want to meet other plant enthusiasts. So that's something that's different that you won't find at a lot of these other types of events and experiences. Anybody can enter. And then lastly, and most directly, it's a fundraiser. So it's going and directly funding the work that we just saw. It's not going to fund something happening in 10 years or 13 years if we can kind of slalom through the paperwork, right? There's real-time things happening. You can see evidence of it right there in the city, and it's unrestricted funding that goes directly to help these programs or the shared services that support these programs. So I like to think about kind of the pre-COVID and then the post-COVID world. I guess there's actually 3. There's pre-COVID, there's COVID, and then there's post-COVID. So a lot of the things I'm going to show you on the next slides had sort of started during or right before COVID, but it's a huge event with a ton of stakeholders. There's over 3,000 volunteers who passionately and rightfully so feel like they own a part of the flower show. It's been around forever. Some people have been doing this for 40 or 50 years. So that kind of affiliation and that kind of ownership is great, but it needs to be handled with care as you sort of redirect this ship around. But COVID was a unique opportunity in that we were able to use that event to maneuver a lot of changes that would have otherwise taken a long time. And so that's why I say this sort of pre-COVID and post-COVID. We were outside for 2 years in FDR Park. If anybody went, it was a totally different experience than this, which is great too. I'll talk about that, but FDR is, a park designed by the Olmsted firm, so we don't have a lot of that style of park in Philadelphia with the great prospect and refuge and meandering paths, and so it was really cool. It was fun to work with them because we were able to sort of, help them move along some projects that they were trying to get done. We were able to help restore the park, restore several of the structures, redo many of the pathways. So again, kind of direct action and betterment of a public space, through the organization and through the flower show, which was pretty cool to see it in practice real time. Now, I have been with PHS for almost 10 years, not necessarily in this capacity, doing other design work. I started as a landscape designer and eventually moved into this role. And to this day, this is still probably what most people think of the flower show. You think Princess Grace judging like an arrangement of some sort, I still hear about the Civic Center from the 60s, another person, from a specific garden club. In this instance, it's a Royal from Monaco. And there still is this, and that's fine, and still a part of the show, and there is that. But as I said, post-COVID, the show has drastically evolved past just standalone displays for the sake of beauty and individual plants on display. We love that, we welcome it. It's still part of the show, but you'll see that the curated content is becoming more elevated, more diverse, more intent on responding to what's happening in the world. It's a big initiative at the organization. It's a big deal for us, and COVID helped us really kind of streamline that a little bit. So we talked about reframing what this event is through kind of how it fits, how these pieces of the puzzle fit. So personally, I think of the flower show as a place for connecting and convening ideas for how horticulture can advance health and well-being. So it's a connector and a convener in my mind. Designers, exhibitors, judges who participate, it's a wide variety of diverse individuals who have something to say or something important to share. So it's a platform for folks who have the same priorities that the organization has. And that is this idea of curating for the sense of the greater good. At the organization, at PHS, we have an ethos, a kind of a philosophy, if you will, on what it means to garden for the greater good. So gardening for the greater good is based on four principles, four kind of loose principles. It means celebrate gardening, so plant what you love. Almost any space can be a garden. Choose your plants with intention. Choose plants that benefit wildlife. Choose organic. See your garden as part of a system. It's not just a standalone thing, but it's this living network. It's a system. So, compost, go electric. There's many other bullet points we could have here, but it's part of a system. And then lastly, embrace a sharing mindset. So donate produce, mentor, share knowledge, get somebody else involved, take somebody to the flower show, right? Those are the four underpinnings. It's gardening for the greater good is what that ethos is. And since COVID, we've been able to start to curate the show, curate the exhibitors and the content more and more in line with something like this. So, previous to COVID, we had, a lot of place-based themes, all great, wonderful stuff. You'll see a little bit more of the gardening for the greater good ethos as we bring the show and the theme and the content in line with the rest of what the organization is doing out in the world. So the next three slides are some interesting people you might not know have done something with the flower show. Martha Schwartz did a garden with us last year, the OG of crazy, thought-provoking landscape. I couldn't believe it that Martha Schwartz was at the show. I come from a landscape design or architecture background, so it probably meant more to me than it did to most people on the staff. And I'm like, guys, freaking Martha Schwartz is here. David Rubin, Land Collective, our very own David Rubin in Old City, amazing firm, amazing group of designers and thinkers. They did an incredible garden this year. His amazing tool collection is on display. Or they did a garden last year. His incredible antique tool collection is on display. A wonderful thinker in landscape and open spaces that are accessible for all. Far and wide, Harihanto is from Singapore. Abdallah Tibet is from Olin. Olin has participated in this way. Wamboy Ippolito, amazing garden designer in Long Island. She seems to know everybody that I talk to. Ill Exotics down in South Philly, redefining how young people or a younger generation interact with plant material. David Hill at Auburn University worked with Abra Lee from Conquer the Soil to do this incredible student project last year. Jeff Leatham is Kim Kardashian's florist. They did a project with us. Kona Gray from EDSA, which is this amazing landscape storytelling, placemaking firm. They do a lot of theme parks and master plans. They've done something with us. Andy Sturgeon, some considered one of the best gardeners or garden designers in the UK, has been with us before. This amazing collective this year, Black Girl Florists, each one of these, and there's probably 2 more slides I could add, are florists from around the country, not just Philadelphia, all coming to build something. Super cool group, can't wait to see their display. Elizabeth Cronin from HBO's Full Bloom, Conrad from Streets Department, we've worked with him to curate murals, including Lace in the Moon. Cindy Lozito from last year, Kat Klar, whose work is down at the airport right now. Very provocative stuff with sculpture and florals. Bach Studio has done stuff with us. Gardens, judging other content, whatever their medium is. So I like these 3 slides because there still is the impression in one's mind that it's that first slide with Princess Grace. And again, we welcome that, and there is a place for that. But as you can see, there's also a ton of other thinkers, artists, designers, content makers doing things. And ideally, people are in line with our gardening for the greater good principles in some loose way. And as we curate this, and you see more and more of this design as platform coming through, slowly we can start to reach more and more people, change minds, change gardening practices, have discussions like that. So that's really how that exhibited content should work on the show floor. So as I said, it's about reframing what the flower show experience is. It's beautiful, it's amazing, it's saturated with color. Perhaps it could be said it's emotional because there's, stuff everywhere, there's flowers all over the place. But behind the scenes, the thing that's driving the content on the show floor is that connecting and convening landscape designers, architects, gardeners, artists, thinkers, even just plant lovers and plant enthusiasts who are in line with our mission of advancing health and well-being through horticulture. So as I said, it's beautiful, it's uplifting, but it's a message and it's a fundraiser whose content goes to hit all of those programs that we talked about. Tiny WPA worked with us on this vacant lot project to do this amazing poppy, cool little mobile pergola. And I'm not saying the flower show made this particular thing possible, but it definitely translates down and makes this work possible. So if you're purchasing a ticket, you're actually helping to do this work. You're participating in that broader conversation. You're seeing some other makers, content, thoughts on environment, on landscape, on horticulture in the world through display. And when you do so, you're helping advance the mission of PHS. So as I said, those four building blocks are kind of, what we use to filter everything through. Just to review, creating healthy living environments, increasing access to fresh food, building meaningful social connections, and expanding economic opportunity. Those are those 4 pieces that we try to align everything we do. The public gardens and landscapes is the one team, the healthy neighborhoods is the middle team here, and then the shows and the events is the connecting and the convening of ideas in that sort of dynamic, emotional way that only gathering and events can do, as we are here doing today. And lastly, I'll end with this particular slide. So this is the Cocodama Forest. This is Nomad Studio, based out of Spain and in New York as well. And this is a cool project, very simple, concave structure that you walk into, and it's a seedling forest. And it's pretty cool when you're in there, you're looking around, it's got 300 little saplings, all mid-Atlantic natives. So, you have this beautiful display. It's motivated by an interesting statement to the world. And then the end goal, the metalwork, went to a campus in Texas as a piece of art, and then an arboretum was able to take the saplings and then receive 300 native trees from it. So, I would say a win-win-win, because you have a great exhibit. You've got something that's really cool to look at if, you want to keep it nice and light, and then it's going on to do awesome work afterwards. So, and there's many examples of this, but one of my favorites as well. So, thank you very much, and I will pass it back over to...
Oh, Seth, you're not done yet.
Oh, no.
No.
Oh, God.
It's Q&A.
Oh, gosh. Okay.
Don't try to get out of this.
Thank you.
Big hand for Seth. And then we send it back to Jermaine.
I won't pass it yet. No passing.
Does anyone have any questions, or do you want to let them off the hook? Don't do it. Got questions? Do this game show style.
Hi. I'm just curious, with all the amazing programming and events that you produce, like how your creative services team works, like how many designers there are, and your approach to all the signage and wayfinding, creating like a cohesive brand across the whole city.
That is a good one. So we have a hardworking and beleaguered team who is working furiously as a graphic designer does. And Kristen Bauer leads that team, and it's in our marketing team. And they, split their time between wayfinding and initiatives throughout the organization, in the community. And then the flower show, signage for big events in general is tricky. Do you go digital, which is expensive? Do you go print and try to reuse? And if you do that, how long is that brand going to be good for? Are we going to make this work for 5 years? So it's graphic designers tucked within our marketing team, and the marketing team basically oversees the master plan of graphic content. And then you end up, imperfectly, you're doing the best you can, juggling between, signs getting replaced. Are we going to redo the branding next year? Do we want to pay for the other sign again? So we still have a lot of those like really nitty gritty nuts and bolts details. But and then my team also has some designers that will pitch in when the graphic design team needs a little bit of backup as well. So I would say it's pretty multidisciplinary in that regard. So.
Hi, thanks for your presentation today. COVID must have presented, some real challenges and opportunities. The shift to the outdoor show must have been exciting and harrowing. Was it always a foregone conclusion that we can't wait to get back to the convention center, or was there conversation about maybe this should be an outside show? And what lessons did you learn or can be applied to an indoor show about the visitor experience or anything like that?
Amazing, good question. So, funnily enough, in my Evernote account, I have notes from the first time I dragged a few people down to FDR Park in 2013 and was like, oh my gosh, we need to be out here. This would be amazing, right? So we had been talking about it unofficially and offline. And so, COVID hit 2020, events pretty much shut down. I think we might have been maybe the last major event in the country of our size who still, we sort of ended, and then 2 days later, everything shut down. And then there was a period of uncertainty, and we didn't know what was going to happen. We knew that it was important to keep the show going because not just for funding, but also because so many different groups use the show as an anchor for their things as well. So if you stop the show, you're doing what you need to do for the organization, but if you are a convener and other people are relying on the thing that you do, it's pretty disruptive. So we thought, all right, because the show is that, we should keep this thing going. We need to do it in the safest way possible. We planned the first outdoor show in about 6 months. And it was lovely, but I will say the lessons learned from that show reflected in the data that we gathered from guest feedback to the second show, in my opinion, made for a much more cohesive, meaningful, coherent experience, right? So I felt the two shows were very, very different and improved. And I was a huge fan of being outdoors in South Philly at FDR. We took some of the stuff that we learned there that we probably wouldn't have been able to learn here. And you'll see there's a ton of changes going on this year. The wayfinding is totally different, doing more of an IKEA style, everybody moving in the same direction. Previously when you look at kind of the pre-show design work, it was a bit more choose your own adventure style where, if I go left or if I go right or if I go straight, I don't know the consequences of that decision. Will I miss something on the right side? The convention center's massive, so getting back over there is really tedious if I'm a visitor. So, it's some of the event basics like building in parklet seating right on the show floor, which we had outside, IKEA style experiences. The curation and the arrangement is totally different. A lot of the back end stuff is pretty different. So I would say, there's not one single thing that we were not able to reconsider because of the data and the lessons learned from the previous two outdoor shows. Now, as far as, kind of long-term plans, something like this usually with the number of stakeholders has a pretty long lead time, and you end up having to sort of commit to venues and ideas and plans well in advance. And, given the state of the world and, the business models behind the events and outdoor shows, it was, kind of a foregone conclusion that we would go back to something where we had a bit of a better real world understanding versus a COVID snapshot. So I would say, unofficially, it's still something we're noodling with. To me, they feel like two totally unique events. I mean that in the best possible way. This event feels like the pace is different. It's a lot more about these individual moments of surprise. It's, known for its gateway to spring aspect. The outdoor show feels more like a meander in the park. It's in a park. And, the pace is just different. So to me, they feel like two different displays. I feel like, I sort of unofficially advocate for room for both in the world. So, yeah. Any other questions at all?
Thanks. Thank you, Seth, again for speaking today. The question I have is, I know that in the past the theme has been sort of like place-based, based on a location. And in recent years, it sort of moved into this direction that is more sort of like thought-provoking, right? So for this year, it's Garden Electric, correct? What does that mean for you, Garden Electric? And then also, how do you get to that, how does that process come about, and how do you get to that place of what is that theme going to be with your team?
Interesting question. So I always go back and forth on the notion of theming. I've advocated for no theme. I've advocated for different theme. And when I say I mean the collective group conversations that we have. And I will say, when you do a huge retail-facing event without a theme, we've found that people don't quite know how to orient themselves to what they're expecting. So previously, we did a lot of place-based themes. The themes were decided between sort of my predecessor, people on the marketing team, and then a few kind of strategic partners or board members. And at the time, you could, use place-based themes and then partner with regions, locations. So when we did Holland, the Netherlands was a huge partner. So, there is on the back end this really practical aspect to place-based themes. And so that was fine, and I think that worked for what the world was. The thought-provoking themes are a bit more, from the vein of, I think any event that's out in the world, is seeking to change somebody in some small way, right? At its very, very basic element. If you're having a big event, you should seek to make a change in somebody, even if it's just some tiny thing. And in order to do that, I think you have to be responsive to what's happening in the world. So, the world was crazy for those 2 years, so that's why you see subtle themes where you're looking at the way plant material can make a home or a habitat for you or for non-human entities. So the design prompts were loosely in those for a lot of the designers. The second year explored the connection between mental health and gardens. It's not the same as a biennale. The show is pretty well attended. It's retail facing, so it's not like, just to the field. So the themes can't be so like high or unrelatable that people don't connect with what they're going to expect for mass market or for retail audiences. So, you got to hit that sweet spot between not too abstract, it still should have great words that people like, words that are not super alienating to, maybe, a non-professional or true enthusiast. And so that's a little bit behind the scenes theme. The Garden Electric, to me, is a response to the last 2 years where we dealt with themes of horticulture and healing and mental health and wellness. I would say passive themes in the best possible way, right? Like how gardens can receive you and help you heal. So that was sort of the last 2 years, but they can also be exciting, joyful. They don't always have to be just palliative or a response to something. So there's also the expectations of going back into the convention center. A ton of people love it in the convention center. They're excited that it's back. Because of the juxtaposition, you don't expect what you see there is going to be on the inside of those walls. So from that event experience, I'm going up the escalator and I'm turning right and there's no indication of what's on the other side. And then all of a sudden I'm in this crazy flower world. Like, people love that little moment. And we also wanted a theme that didn't get in the way of designers being able to deliver right on guest expectation, right? So the Garden Electric was really about these jolts, these moments, these, you know, when you see something so beautiful, it almost seems alive, it almost feels electric. Initially, it was hoping it would be a nod to Walt Whitman, but then I reread that poem and I was like, nah, maybe not so much. But it really is a show about, you know, a specific moment of change, right? It's the position that interacting with plants, flowers, and gardens, if you learn to see them as, you know, celebratory things, as things that provide a positive shot of something good, then your life will improve, or your life would be better if you had that little bit of, you know, that little glass to look at a garden through. And so that's really what that theme is about, and it's a little backstory as to like, why that theme in concert with the previous themes.
Hi, I just had a quick question. If you were a master gardener or a beekeeper on Broad Street, like, how do you contribute, or how can you contribute to the flower show?
Oh, well, it depends. I could most directly just give you my card shortly after, but typically you would reach out online to the website, and there's a place where you can send a question, and then somebody on the back end would receive it and then filter, you know, right to the right person. And then sort of more broadly, you know, if you were like a garden maker or a content maker, you know, that would probably come to some version of my team. We would set up a meeting and, you know, kind of figure out, you know, kind of what the next intent for the coming shows would be, and work to find something that made sense. You know, vendors who are selling things, that's a different team, but I would start with that website, and it would filter out, pop up in the right spot. So.
Time for one more question,
Great.
and then you can hassle Seth after the talk in person.
Hi, we're in the Kensington area where people seem to be very afraid of trees, the potential damage it could do to their underground pipes, which is obviously a myth. How do you see addressing that and kind of reassuring people that the street trees won't do any damage?
Say the first part of the question again.
Oh, the street trees, people are very afraid of them, of the damage it could do to their
Sure.
underground pipes, etc. How do we address that?
How do we address that? So on the tree tenders team, you know, it's pretty extensively covered through, I think it's currently like 6 sort of Saturday sessions, and you know, it is a lot of myth dispelling, but just in full transparency, there are some communities who are, you know, maybe not interested in having tree canopy because it hits the door. A lot of people still think of the sweet gums or the ginkgos, which would have, you know, lots of leaf fall or leaf drop. And it's a pretty sensitive issue. I wish I had a more elegant answer, but I don't, because it's sort of something we're dealing with real time. So it's, you know, it's myth dispelling, it's providing information, it's the right trees. So it's letting people know we no longer plant, you know, the ginkgo with the seedlings or the sweet gums with the seedlings. And then it's, of course, not forcing it on anybody. So most of the time after interacting with the tree tenders team, we have a lot of success with people, you know, understanding, you know, placement is considered. The mess is a lot less than you might think. And most people, after kind of, you know, concerns can be heard and review that, there is frequently a change of heart. But again, if somebody doesn't want a street tree, you know, we certainly don't force it upon anybody. I know it's not maybe the most tight answer, but, you know, it's a real-time thing that we're figuring out kind of the best way to work with communities on it.
Thank you, Seth.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks, everybody.